Greetings and salutations, my friends, and welcome to my recent reads wrap up. Today we are going to recap everything that I read in the month of April. I read a total of 8 different books, all in different genres, from romance to fantasy romance to fantasy to manhwa to contemporary books to translated fiction. We really do have a little bit of everything. Some books that were kind of mid, if I do say so myself, to other things that were the absolute best, and books that I'm also conflicted on. I think this may be one of the most conflicting wrap-ups I have done in a while, because there are definitely books in this list that I have yet to make my mind on, and I have been tugging back and forth between, is it this rating, is it that rating, this is how I feel, but can I vocalize that in a way that makes sense? So let's hope that today is the day where I get to do all of that in the most coherent way possible. And as always, let a girl know down below what you guys read in the month of April, or what you've read recently, any new favorites, any things that you might have DNF'd, some things that maybe you didn't necessarily like. Let me know if there's any overlap with the books that I read. I always like to hear you guys' takes on the books that I am reading. You all know that I love the subjectivity of books and seeing how different people react to different books, and so if you've got any thoughts or opinions, do let a girl know in the comments. Got to love me a good debate. Pause and double pause though, because before we get started with today's video, I do have to give a shout out to Book of the Month for partnering with me today and for being a long-standing partner of the channel. I think it's no secret at this point how much I love Book of the Month. I've talked about it time and time again over the past 3 years and how they're my favorite book subscription service because they give us, the readers, the ability to choose exactly what we get on our blue box every single month instead of it being chosen at random. Their team is vetting through hundreds of books every single month, and out of everything that they browse, they give us a curated selection of anywhere from 5 to 7 book titles, all in different genres, from historical fiction to thriller to romance to fantasy to young adult. They really have it all. And if physical books are not your speed, now they offer audiobooks on their app if that is something more akin to how you like to consume your books. What's so cool is that these are all new and early release titles from new and emerging authors, and that really takes away all of that tedious investigation process to find out exactly what's coming out, what's new, what's worth it, so that you can kind of consolidate that all into a single place and just choose and read and enjoy what you read without having to do all the research yourself. This month in my stunning blue box, I got 2 different books, but the first one is particularly exciting because it's a fantasy book, and that is 5 Broken Blades by Mike Corland, which talks all about treachery, and specifically 5 different liars all vying to take out their king. And can we talk about how gorgeous the cover for Spitting Gold is? This was so captivating that I had to get myself a copy too. It talks all about sisterhood and seances and sapphic love, all with a gothic background set in the 1800s. It sounds like the best time. And this month you can use the code PETALS to get your first book for $5, which is an absolute steal. You're not gonna find that price anywhere else for a new hardcover fiction, so I'll leave them links down below so you guys can go check them out. Don't say I didn't tell you. And I have to say, as in previous months, I have been good. He sido una ciudadana buena, señores, porque every book I have read so far has been on my TBR. I've been very good at that. I have to give myself flowers for that, because if you've been here for a while, listen, this channel has been alive for the better part of the past almost 4 years, and I've always read outside of TBR. I cannot stick to it to save my life, where I couldn't. Let me speak in past tense, baby, because now we can. It's called character development, if I do say so. Most of these books were in my TBR, save for 2 of them, but honestly, with the quickness in which I read them, it didn't really get in the midst of me reading other things in my TBR, and so altogether, I will count it as a success that I read 8 books in April. It was a good month. And let us start out with the book that was actually not on my TBR. In April, I got the book physically. I just wasn't planning on reading it in April, because I thought, what better way than to kind of pace myself, right? Read it in May, maybe read it in June, not really take it so fast, and yet as soon as it got here, I said, give me, dámelo, tráemelo, lo quiero leer. And then I did read it. That is Wild Love by Elsie Silver. One of the books that I'm also very conflicted on, because I liked parts of it, while parts of it did not hit for me. And as far as Elsie Silver goes, I would expect the book to really hit, because most of the Chestnut Spring series was a huge success for me. But alas, her latest 2 releases, also known as Hopeless from the Chestnut Spring series, and then this one, I didn't love nearly as much. The way that this next series, the Rose Hill series, is set up is to be a series following single fathers, which you guys already know I personally love. I love the single parent trope. Get me more of that. Estoy sedienta y trastornada por eso. Me encanta, señores. There's nothing more satisfying than seeing 2 people fall in love with that trope thrown in the mix, because with that, typically the succession of events leads to them connecting and bonding watching over the child first, and the love interest getting along with the child first, and the characters really getting to know each other on a way that is not so surface level. And I liked seeing those connections that go deeper than your regular romance book. And so I was expecting that, didn't necessarily get it. And I think it's because the setup was really different. So we have our main character, Ford, which we observe primarily, I'd say, in the story. Ford is Willa from Chestnut Springs series' brother, and he is a music producer. He's super successful. He has been in the music industry for years and years now. And yet one day he gets a knock on the door from a girl claiming that she is his daughter and that she actually needs to stay with him. It's kind of like a Game Plan situation, the movie with Dwayne Johnson and Madison Pettis. Exactly like that. She just shows up out of the blue and she's like, hey, kind of have to stay with you. And this all happens as he is moving back to Rose Hill. So he is going back to his hometown, which he never really thought he would do, to settle down. And things get more complicated when his best friend's sister arrives in town as well after having a lot of difficulty with her job and being laid off. And so she gets there. They've always had this connection going on, but they've never actually gotten together because obviously her brother, his best friend, is thrown in the mix. And so they don't want to complicate things more than they need to. They've always had this bantery kind of hateful dynamic, which is very clearly attraction, even though they may not want to admit it. And they kind of go from there in developing that specific connection into something allegedly deeper, allegedly more sustainable, allegedly romantic. And honestly, it was all lacking for me. I typically like the single parent trope because I find the kid typically very endearing, and I didn't find Ford's kid particularly nice in this one. To be quite honest, she came across as very bratty and very ungrateful a lot of the time, when this is clearly a situation that Ford didn't ask for, but he finds himself kind of trying to do his best most of the time. And I find that her lack of grace when it comes to this specific situation, I didn't find that particularly appealing. I found it low-key annoying at times. I didn't really love her, and even her dynamic with Ford, I found that extremely lacking, even though it was supposed to be a connection that develops quite well throughout time. It was mentioned several times during the book that Ford develops his paternal instinct just naturally, but we never really get to see it. We're just told it. And so I found that the moments between those two, specifically towards the beginning of the book where we're relying on seeing that connection, because we've never seen them together before, obviously, was just not there. We were just told like, oh my god, I would now kill for this girl, but how did we get there? Something must have triggered this. Whether it was a moment that you saw her having fun, or somebody did something to her at school, what was the catalyst for that specific thought? We didn't get to see that. And then when it came to the connection between Ford and Rosie, I didn't really love that. She was very clearly a brat. Didn't do anything for me. Not really. The smut in this one was also not that good in comparison to the other ones, which is annoying because if you're gonna include smut, it might as well just be good. I don't need it to survive, but if it's gonna be there, make it good, you know, to make it worth my while. And all of their banter and low-key antagonizing each other time and time again, didn't really like that a lot either. I was really conflicted with this book because I found myself finding more things that I disliked than the things that I didn't. It was a fun read, it was a quick read, but it wasn't the best. And so to me, it's like a 2.5 star if I have to be honest. So Wild Love by Elsie Silver was not a win, sadly, but I'm hoping that the next release is better because we need redemption. You're gonna start to realize real quick that the majority of the books I read this month have got a very specific color scheme. I don't know what happened there. It almost looks like these books were meant to be read in February. Throne of the Fallen is next, and this was actually a really, really good time. From the spice that was really, really well done, to the world building, to the character development, to the plot twist, I really enjoyed this one. The only thing that I didn't particularly love about it was the ending, because I felt like it was too happy for what we were getting before. Outside of that, everything about this book worked for me. So this specific series that Kerri Maniscalco has developed is a follow-up to the Kingdom of the Wicked series. Each of this is an individual book following a different Prince of Hell, and as opposed to Kingdom of the Wicked, this is supposed to be a fully realized adult series. And in this one, we follow Prince Envy as he faces a lot of dire events at his court. In fact, his court is kind of cursed at the moment, and so he has to enter a Fae competition in order to get a very specific artifact so that he can restore the full magic and health of his court back. Things get a little bit tricky when he finds a clue that leads him to a human artist, Camila Antonius, in order to commission a very specific piece that is going to then lead him to the next clue, to the next path, so that he can potentially win the whole thing. Camila, though, has secrets of her own that she is not that forthcoming with, and on top of that, she is very reluctant to say yes, but then she's got troubles of her own, like the fact that another guy is trying to commission very specific pieces from her, and he is kind of a pain in the ass, and so in order to get him off her ass, she basically agrees to help Envy out in this particular quest. Things get really complicated, things go from there, and it's a quick read and a lot of fun. I really liked that Camila was not like every other female protagonist in fantasy books. I find that female protagonists are typically so quick to grab a sword and slay your enemies, and that's all fun and dandy. I love that. Embrace your divine masculine. Lord knows I do it. However, I think it had a different sort of power to see her be very, very cunning, go about, I guess, winning her own game or winning the game overall with very different strategies that didn't involve her killing anybody or raising a weapon or raising an army of any kind. It was her and her wits and her knowledge and her brain and her hands really doing the work for her. And I really loved how different and refreshing that was in comparison to everything else that I typically read. To see Kira Maniscalco go a very different route than what we typically see these days in the fantasy romance area was really, really nice. And then to see Envy, who, while yes is a prince of hell, is somebody who is very devoted to his court and who wants the best for his court, and you can see how seeing his court at a lower stature than it was before really, really hurts him. Not because of ego, not because of anything, although envy does play a huge part in it. He wants people to envy him because that fuels his power. He also just feels bad that people have gotten embroiled in something that really doesn't involve them. And so I think as far as character motivations to help each other out, to help themselves kind of move forward, it was all very good. It was also very well developed. I was really pleasantly surprised to see that a fantasy romance, which is kind of the easy route I have come to find out, this fantasy romance didn't solely rely on their romance, on their smut for it to have a really good plot or for them to have really good chemistry. In fact, they didn't get together up until later on in the story, which was very refreshing as well. But more than anything, it really was the fact that it had proper world building. It didn't sacrifice the world and the court politics and us understanding as readers how everything machinates in order to portray the romance as a good thing. I loved that everything was so well balanced and everything had its own spot in the story. It was so, so good. So to me, Throne of the Fallen was a solid 4.5 star. Had it not been for that wacky ending, I would have given it a full 5. But honestly, such a good turnaround from Carrie Maniscalco, because Kingdom of the Wicked after that second book was a no-go for me. But this is a win. Next up, we have got some translated fiction, and that was Sweet Bean Paste. I read this for my This Video Doesn't End Until I Find a 5-Star Book video, and this I thought would be a 5-star. Alas, it was not. I ended up going for a 3-star, although in hindsight, I really could rate this a 2-star. It really wasn't the best in my opinion, especially for all that people hyped it up to be. I thought it would have been a deeper story, that maybe we would have explored so many other different thematics than what we ended up hyper fixating on for most of the story. And while some of the messaging is clear after reading the author's note, I don't know that the journey and the story itself displays what the author note retells. And so I'm a little bit conflicted on this one. We follow our main character Sentaro, who after being imprisoned comes out of jail, and he is hired at this food truck to cook dorayaki, which is a specific type of pancake filled with sweet bean paste. However, the establishment is not doing so good. He is taking care of ledgers and things that he is not supposed to because the real owner of the establishment is kind of far removed from the operational side of things. And so it really does seem like a one-man operation. But that all changes once he gets approached by Tokue, who sees the sign that they're hiring, and she is an old lady with disfigured hands. He's also got a paralyzed face and many other things that physically Sentaro considers to be unappealing. And so although she claims to make the best sweet bean paste and that she wants to work, she's actually willing to accept a lower wage and that she's just there for the experience, Sentaro doesn't believe that she needs to be there, mostly because he feels like she is going to scare potential customers away. However, after trying her sweet bean paste and confirming that it is in fact the best he has tried, he ends up hiring her behind the back of the owner of the establishment. Things kind of go from there, and the entire exploration of the book is meant to analyze how valuable people are outside of what they can tangibly contribute to society. How do you define your own sense of worth without taking into account your job or without taking into account how much you're helping others? Who are you and what do you stand for and what is your value outside of those things? And how can you impact the world on the grander scheme of things without taking those things into consideration? And it sounds like the most gut-wrenching, existential, complex analyses of things, and yet the way that the book goes about things doesn't really display, I would even argue, the majority of that. Like, I don't know how a reader would get any of that thematic just from reading the book alone. I would argue that parts of it maybe could allude to it, but as a whole, I feel like the author's note was more concrete and more defined in terms of what the book is trying to do than the book itself. And so it was frustrating because the things that I would have considered to be important, like Sentaro's background and where he comes from and why he is the way he is outside of Tokue, which really takes a huge chunk of the book, and the conversation of leprosy, which is also a huge conversation in the book, I would have expected to hear more about either him or these side characters that do take place into the story and that do seem to have a very important role, and yet we don't really get it throughout the story. It's also such a short one that consolidating everything that you want to do into this amount of pages, I think it was a little too ambitious maybe for the page count, and I think the thematics that the author chose, I understand why the author did it. I think it was fascinating to read about because I didn't even know half of what was being discussed in this book, and so it served as a really good educational piece. However, I don't know that it was the best conduit for what we were going for, so it was a little bit of a disappointing one, not gonna lie, and I was really expecting to love this. A 5 and a 4-star respectively, so we ended up with good things as well in the month of April. We've got Villains Are Destined to Die. I ended up reading both of the volumes that I had on deck, which is a mistake, honestly, because volume 7 is not announced yet. We don't have a publication date. We don't even have a cover for it. We have no info on when the next volume is gonna come out. I don't even know that it's come out in Korea, so I don't even know if it's just the translation that is yet to be figured out or if it's the whole print as a whole that we don't know anything about. And while I slightly regret it, in the end, I do not, because it was a lot of fun. So you guys know I've talked about Villains Are Destined to Die plenty of times. These are manhwa, Korean graphic novels, so they are read front to back, and they also have colored illustrations as opposed to manga, which is all in black and white. And this is so good. This is an isekai manhwa, meaning that our main character enters a world other than her own. Imagine something like Alice in Wonderland, except that we don't know exactly how this one is going to end. Is our character going to come out of the game, or is she going to stay in the game? Things we don't necessarily know yet. And we follow our nameless main character as she is playing the new hit romance game, falls asleep playing it, and wakes up inside the world playing in hard mode as the villainess. The way that the game is set up is that if you play in easy mode, you play as Yvonne Eckhart, which is the Duke's daughter, and she has been missing for a really long time. So basically the whole point of her easy mode is to earn enough affection points with the love interest so that they can fight for her honor, earn her place back in their estate, whilst in hard mode it's the complete opposite. You are playing as the villainess, as Penelope Eckhart, which is the stand-in, an exact lookalike for our easy mode heroine, who has been obviously standing in for her ever since she went missing, and her whole point is to earn enough affection points with the love interest so that they will defend her honor and that when Yvonne gets here, she won't be kicked to the curb. However, in hard mode, it's easier to lose affection points than to earn them, and when it gets low enough, the love interests actually kill you, and so it's super hard to win the game. And so because our main character has already played the game in real life and she has cleared a lot of the levels, she already knows how things go on both ends. So she has got the insight of the easy mode and some of the hard mode, even though she's never won. She kind of does know how it goes, and so she machinates and is very cunning all throughout to figure out who to talk to, what to say, how to present herself, how to martyrize herself, how to manipulate the game so that she ends up on top and that she ends up winning some really, really good affection points. And let me tell you something, she's doing it, and she's been doing progressively better in these two volumes. Volume 5 is very Callisto-centric, much like Volume 4, which I love. At this point, I don't want to read about anybody that is not Callisto. There's just something about the chemistry that Penelope and Callisto have that is just making me swoon left and right, and I want them together so bad. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not, but there's just something about that murderous little shit that I absolutely love. And this one's more winter heavy. While Callisto is the crown prince, Winter is another royal, but is actually a sorcerer, but he has to hide that part of himself, and he is one of the most important love interests, and I don't love him like that, but it was a winter heavy volume. And so that's probably why I didn't enjoy this one half as much. There was just something about volume 5 that was particularly amazing. From the trial to the action to the angst to the romance, everything about these 2 volumes was so enjoyable. But volume 5, I think, alongside volume 4, I think those are some faves. This was a favorite too. Magnolia Parks The Long Way Home. She was so good to me. She did not disappoint. She did not stumble. She did not fall. She did not delay. She delivered. Ella vino y arrasó, mami. Ella derrotó. Ella comió. Ella devoró. It was simply too good to be true. This one proved to me that my issue with Daisy Hates was not Jessa Hastings, although kind of partly because she wrote it. But the issue with Daisy Hates is the damn footnotes. They're fucking awful. I don't know why she thought that would be okay, but I need her to take back her word. I need those to be edited out because they're unnecessary. However, this one just took me right back to when I read Magnolia Parks 1 last year. It was every bit as good as I was expecting it to. So in the Magnolia Parks series, we follow a friend group who is all kind of embroiled with each other. Imagine Gossip Girl set in London. It's super messy. It's a rich people drama. And our main characters for the Magnolia Parks book specifically are Magnolia Parks and BJ Ballantyne, who have been childhood best friends, who at some point dated. Everybody has been thinking that they're gonna get married, have a life together. There's no other person for the other, up until BJ Ballantyne went ahead and he cheated on Magnolia. And after cheating on Magnolia, instead of taking her corner and saying, perro, no me vas a mentir de nuevo, instead of putting a hard stop to it and grabbing her corner, she basically stays right beside him. They're still besties for the resties. She has these very specific mechanisms in place to make sure that he still cares for her and vice versa. They date other people, not because they want to, but because they just want to hurt each other. They just want to get a rise and a reaction out of each other because they want to be together. BJ wants Magnolia to give in. Magnolia wants BJ to give in. And it's so messy in so many different levels because of the toxicity involved. If it was any other sane person and any other sane friend group, they'd be like, girl, run. What are you talking about? And yet everybody is so enabling of this situation, and everybody talks about how there's nobody else for each other, how they're supposed to be together, how they're fated in the stars. And yes, they have a lot of history together. It's the easy choice to make, and they make it time and time again to try and get back together, but it's not the healthiest for them. And so a lot of the things that we saw in Magnolia Parks 1 that were kind of left up in the air, we have questions about what do certain events mean, what do certain moments mean. It all gets explained in The Long Way Home, which I was pleasantly surprised by and just very happy with, because I was wondering exactly what those were and what important part they played into the plot. Jessa Hastings delivered, okay? It was really, really good. But on top of that, we see other dynamics that were also kind of introduced in Magnolia Parks 1 that I didn't think we would get to see fully fledged in the story like this, and it makes me more eager to read Daisy Hates The Great Undoing after I finish Daisy Hates 1, because there are many things that obviously I don't get in this one that I need to get from Daisy Hates that I obviously want to find out about. The ending for this was equally, if not more, unfair than book 1. It's just too painful. I thought we were heading towards happiness, towards tranquility, and yet Jessa Hastings came in and she destroyed my heart once more. It's like it's fucking play for her. It's a playground, and I'm the fucking swing. She's like, die, bitch, die. And I just don't need that in my life, yet I choose it. So I'm just like Magnolia. I'm a little bit of a masochist, but it was really good. It was a great time. From the drama to the romance to the toxicity to the rich people shit that happens in here, everything about this delivered the way that I needed to. And I don't think I can fully explain Magnolia without you getting the full experience. Like, I don't think anything I say will fully encapsulate what this experience is like or what the book is about, because there is a shit ton of things that I just cannot say for the sake of not ruining the surprises for you. So if you dare, maybe. Could be a good one. But this is a 5-star. No questions about it. It's a 5-star. Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson was also read in the month of April. Another one that I was conflicted about because I felt like the book was exciting. It was good. It had some fun moments. And yet it didn't really do what I was expecting it to do or what I would have wanted it to do, or even something that I ended up enjoying. You know when thrillers are set up in such a good way that you're like, oh shit, all these crazy things are gonna happen. Oh my god. And then you get to the end and you're like, coño, que chucha fue eso? And you're just left gobsmacked because you're like, what the fuck just happened? Like, where did this come from? And I don't love that. And so Good Girl, Bad Blood is the continuation of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I thought thought that as the second book in the series, it was going to be an independent installment entirely. However, this book follows Pip immediately after A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, as the Andy Bell case is actually being discussed in trial. The trial is happening, and she now has a podcast where she's covering it, and she's talking about how she went about her own investigation, and her boyfriend is actually going into court and kind of feeding her all of the inner tidbits of what's happening in there so that she can report to the people, and people can get a more real-time analyses on how everything's going down. And while that is happening, a disappearance takes place in her town. One of her friend's brother, Jamie Reynolds, goes missing, and he goes missing the night of Andy Bell's memorial. All that basically leads to Pip going down a rabbit hole of investigating what happened to Jamie, very reluctantly at first, because she wants nothing to do with this. She knows exactly what it cost her to investigate the Andy Bell case. She knew that it was very taxing emotionally and physically, and for her family, things that she lost throughout the way weren't really worth it to an extent. Like, they're worth it because you're shedding truth, but in the end, how worth it really is it when you've risked your entire life for it? And so she knows that the cost of it is not small. So she starts doing it reluctantly, kind of finding clues, searching for clues. It's the classic, this is the last person that saw him, but actually that's not the one. Like 5 different people saw him before, and then 3 people before those, and then 15 after those. And so it definitely had a lot of clues and a lot of things happening throughout the story that were like, oh, yo, that's crazy, another person saw him. And it's exciting. Like, it's not exciting. However, when you get to the ending and you get to the entire reveal that basically comes out of nowhere, because there are kind of tidbits here and there, but nothing so prevalent in the storyline that it influences the ending in any way. When the ending came up and the reveal was made, I was like, what? It felt like we were talking about apples the entire time, and then it went, we're talking about lettuce. It's not even another fruit. It's actually a separate food group. It was so confusing when I got to the ending, and I was like, wait, what are we talking about again? It was just so absolutely random that it took me out of the story a little bit, because everything was leading to maybe a different answer, to maybe a different outcome, and I think I would have settled for anything rather than what happened at the end, because it was truly so very random. Like, it was a very frustrating kind of ending, and so kind of underwhelmed by it all towards the end. Like, the lead up was good, but the ending kind of just tore the entire book apart for me. And still I'm giving it 4 stars because I think the lead up to the end was so good, and then the ending kind of messed it up. So I'll go 4 star, a little bit of a compromise. The journey was fun, the ending not so much, and so I'll go with 4. I think specifically I settled at a 4 instead of lower, mostly because this book made me cry, and it made me cry when A Good Girl's Guide to Murder didn't make me cry. This book did a really good job at getting me emotionally invested in the story, and every time we were seeing Jamie's family and the way they were talking to Pip and the way they were talking to each other, the way that realizations were made, and the way that acceptances were met as well, it was so gut-wrenching and so heartbreaking that I just sat there in tears, and I was not expecting to cry over this book. So I think that just getting an emotional rise out of me deserves its praise, and so I'm gonna say a 4 star for the resties. And then A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faisal. This was a 5 star. And now we've got the announcement for the second book. I'll put it up right here. So damned exciting. I need it now. So in this one, we follow Arthi, who is a crime boss over at White Roaring. She owns a tea house that by day is a tea house, and that by night it becomes a blood house, which is entirely illegal, but she finds herself feeding the lowest of the low vampires, the vampires that are not accepted into high society, the vampires that are not really well liked by the general vampire population. Her and her adoptive of a kind brother Jin, they basically run Spindrift together, but the safety of Spindrift is threatened by the government, by their figurehead, and she figures that the only way to save Spindrift is to rally a group of different criminals to infiltrate the vampire society, the Ethereum, to get a very specific artifact in order to save their skins. And so she enlists the help of obviously Jin herself, Flick, who is a forger, Laith, who is a Hashashin, and then Mateo, who is a vampire member of the Ethereum himself. Things kind of go from there. They get messy, they get good, so very good. And what I love about this book more than anything is the fact that the majority of it really is about the heist. We see them plan and scheme and go about their different, I guess, like little side quests so as to contribute for the big quest. It was so amazing. You get to understand each of the characters' motivations so very clearly, from Flick to Jin to Arthi to Laith. Mateo's like a little bit, you know, he's still don't know a whole lot about him because he was not that present in the story, so as to say it's so well defined, but at least everybody else, you can tell why they're a part of this mission. You can tell what's the driving force towards them being involved, and I loved that. I also loved that it was surprising too, but I really loved that we got not only Arthy's romantic development with Leith and somewhat with Mateo, but also a romance between Flick and Jin, which none of these things come to full fruition during the story because there are more important things to do, but we do get to see all of that angst and that longing and that tension and all of those like slight bits and pieces that will later on kind of blow into something bigger. And that aspect I loved. Each relationship is so differently, yet they all make so much sense that Hafsa just really outdid herself in this one. I'm Team Leith. If you've read A Tempest of Tea, let a girl know what team you are. I am fully vying for my white-haired man. I love Leith so much. I just, and the ending, the twist, while I did see some of them coming, I can't say that I saw all of them coming. And when I did see them kind of nearing, it was more towards the end when it was getting more and more obvious, but not since the very beginning. And I love how everything ties together. There's not a single loose end on the book. Everything commiserates and gets together in a way that is so very well done. Hafsa is truly a master of her craft. I am in absolute awe of this book specifically. I loved We Hunt the Flame, but A Tempest of Tea stole my damn soul, and so I need the next book immediately. 5 stars, no questions about it. And that is everything I read in April, friends. Again, I feel like it's all reciting in the same color family, and that's kind of funny, but these are all the things I read in April. 8 different books. I honestly feel like although I had an up and down month, maybe more so than other months, it was still a huge success. We found some 5-star books. I found some all-time new favorites, and that to me will always be a win regardless of what surrounds it. And so I think it was a really good reading month. As always, let a girl know what you read the past month, what you've been up to recently, any favorites, any DNFs, any things you would like to recommend. Have you read any of the books that I read in this video? I would love to know all of that. Give this video a massive thumbs up if you haven't done so already. And if you reached the end of the video, let us leave some music related emojis for Wild Love. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already for more content like this. And if you'd like to support the channel further, I would massively appreciate it. AdSense rates right now are absolute ass. They're so bad. I have seen so many creators talk about the sustainability of AdSense recently. I'm experiencing it myself as somebody who doesn't live in the States and whose AdSense rates are already on the lower end. It's been a massive blow to see the channel do so well and consistently, and yet the numbers do not reflect that. So I would appreciate any help you guys can give to the channel. Patreon is always linked down below in case you guys want to support the channel further. I always say it, you guys don't just support the channel without getting anything back. You will get 2 sprints a week, different live shows like game nights and movie nights and catch-ups and hangouts. You'll get a Discord server, 2 different book clubs, extra videos, bloopers, behind the scenes stuff, a bunch of different things that you're not gonna see anywhere else. So I promise you, you do get the bang for your buck. That is always linked down below alongside the rest of my socials. I love you guys so much, and I shall see you on the next one.
Bye.